Thank you, President Camp and Mr. Noordin, and thank you, the Atlantic Council, for inviting me here, and thank you, all of you, for coming here and giving me a chance to interact with you. I'll have very brief remarks, and then I guess Josh and Uzair will ask me questions, and then all of you will make comments and ask questions. So I'm looking forward to an interactive session. I normally do just economics, but I think today I'll start with some politics and then jump into economics. I want to start with how the government in Pakistan changed recently. As you know, we had a no confidence motion against the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, in Parliament. Pakistan has had no confidence motions before. In particular, the Pakistan Muslim League Noon and Nawaz Sharif-led party actually held a no confidence motion against Benazir Bhutto's party, People's Party, when she was Prime Minister. But that failed. And before that, I think they tried once in the 1950s. So this was a try. We've been trying this for like about, in the month of October, we were talking about this. In February of this year, the People's Party leadership and the Muslim League leadership got together. They announced that they're going to bring in a no confidence motion. And so there was a movement going on. Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister, essentially then started talking about some Quranic verses, it's called Amr bil Maroof and Nahi anil Munkar. Meaning that this is promotion of virtue and prevention of vices, somehow that we were the, standard bearers of vice, and he was somehow the standard bearer of virtue. That, by the way, for reference, was also a line that Taliban used in the previous incarnation. They had a ministry of that name. But we were focused on inflation, and we did a movement and social media campaign and a lot of campaigning on inflation. And Imran Khan going, and he sort of knew that he's going to lose, but so he did one gambit, and he fixed diesel and petrol prices, motor gasoline prices and diesel prices, at a very low level. At a level, let's say about, if the international oil prices were at $70 a barrel, that's where the Pakistani, diesel and petrol prices are. And today, of course, it's $110. So the government of Pakistan is losing a lot of money. But that was a sort of if you will, a trap set for us, once we came in the government. In the event, we tried to do everything to prevent the vote. He did not even hold the vote as constitutionally mandated. Finally, the Supreme Court sort of said that you have to do it, and he did it. I think the vote took place at 11 o'clock in the evening, and the session of the assembly started at 10 in the morning, so it was a very, very long day. Finally, he lost the vote of no confidence and left the Prime Minister's office. And Shehbaz Sharif, the former Chief Minister of Punjab, became the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Shehbaz Sharif is not the leader of our party. He's the president of the party, but his older brother Nawaz Sharif, the former Prime Minister, is the leader of our party. But Shehbaz Sharif is somebody who's governed in Punjab, the largest province of Pakistan, for a very long time, and has been able to deliver, especially in the field of education, healthcare, and is generally recognized as somebody who's provided really good governance in the province of Punjab. So much so that Punjab today has considerably more developed than the other three smaller provinces, and that actually causes some fissures in the federation. But nonetheless, Shehbaz Sharif's reputation as a doer is solidified in Pakistan, quite solid in Pakistan. Since Imran has left, he's thrown a tantrum, and he's on a tour of Pakistani cities, questioning why he's been fired. That's not the first time a former Prime Minister, fired Prime Minister, has done that. But he's now invented a new conspiracy theory that somehow the Americans conspired against getting him out. But hopefully that conspiracy theory will die under the weight of its own implausibility. But for now, he's riding a popular wave and now he's going against us for inflation and all that. I'll come to the economics. One of the things that Imran did was, like I said, when he decreased the price of petrol and diesel, was to derail an IMF program. We were in the last year of an IMF program. Normally, the IMF program lasts for 3 years. and after belt tightening the first year and some consolidation the second year, in the third year of a program, you normally see countries' reserves going up, foreign exchange reserves going up, and some consolidation taking place. This is completely inverted, and Pakistan has actually lost a lot of foreign exchange reserves. Just in the last month, I think we lost about $5 billion. And the IMF program has derailed quite a bit. And one of the reasons I've come here, in fact, is to try and set the program back on track. That's very important for me as a Minister of Finance, and it's important for our political party that we get Pakistan back on an IMF program, and that helps us with other multilateral institutions and even the bilateral countries that support us in our neighborhood from the Middle East and China and all that. They also want us to get back to an IMF program. So I'm quite hopeful to do that. And this morning also I had a very good meetings with the IMF, and we're working with a lot of countries, including America, in helping us get back on track with the IMF, and also to get out of this FATF grey list, this Financial Action Task Force. We've been on this grey list now for about close to 4 years, and we were given, I think, 27 actions items, as they say, and I think we've successfully completed 26. Then they gave an additional 7 items. We've successfully completed 6 of those. So some of these items remain, and whereas I think that for instance, the IMF is kind of right to ask us to do a few things to get back on track, and justifiably says that we ourselves took actions that got us off track. I think that FATF sort of keeps changing goalposts a little bit here, more than once. And Pakistan, I personally think, today is probably more compliant with FATF regulations than most any country in the world. But nonetheless, I mean, if to the extent that they need to also see political will, we will exhibit that, and we wish to get out of the FATF grey list. I said when I met with FATF people many years ago that Pakistan intends to play the role that the international community expects of it, and we shall do that. And I think that whether it's FATF or whether it's IMF, that we wish to be a normal country which plays by the rules that are, applicable to all other nations, but we don't obviously want changing goalposts. At this point, we will have an election in Pakistan within the next year. I think by August 10th or something, the assembly expires. So we have to have an elections before that. Ours right now is a very large coalition with different political parties, and we will obviously run elections against each other. We are not used to coalition governments, so Shehbaz Sharif has his work cut out for him. But I think that if we can deliver some economic successes, we should be okay, and that's what we are looking for. We think, or at least we advertise ourselves as the more competent political party in Pakistan, the most competent political party in Pakistan. And it remains to be seen whether we can deliver on all the promises that we've made to the people of Pakistan. I think I'll just stop here and then let you ask questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In the packet in front of you and in front of all of you is some of the research we've been doing over here. We hope it's useful to you, and we look forward to doing more of it. It includes a very recent report launched at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Forum in Dubai about Pakistan's potential role as an infrastructure connector, a report by our own Uzair Yunus on the potential of Web 3.0 for Pakistan, as well as some political analysis. So we look forward to being a partner in your efforts to rebuild Pakistan's economy. And just on a personal note, I should say a decade ago, I wrote a book called Coalition Politics and Economic Development. So if you need help on the coalition part of it, I'm happy to make some suggestions too.
The man is still hawking it.
Yeah, 10 years later. I can also tell you about the other 2 books.
The other 2 books.
But here we are.
You want to talk about your publications?
I'm an academic. What else do we do? We have the great pleasure of having 2 very leading voices on economic issues, one from a global perspective, one focused singularly on South Asia and Pakistan, joining us to ask questions of Dr. Ismail to start, and then we'll turn to our audience here in the room. I'm going to start with you.
think it was a...
Okay, so we're
to
going to start with my colleague Josh Lipsky, Senior Director of the Geoeconomic Center. Josh.
Well, thank you, Irfan, for that introduction. Minister, thank you for being here, to your entire delegation, and Dr. Bakir, Minister of State for Finance, Pasha, thank you for being here as well. It's an honor to welcome you on an extraordinarily busy week. It's always busy during IMF week, but we know this is an extraordinarily difficult and challenging time, so we appreciate you making time to be here at the Council. I wanted to start with what you spoke about with the IMF. Of course, a long history between Pakistan and the IMF, and I wonder if you could go into a little more detail for us. One, how you think your approach might differ from some of your predecessors, and thinking specifically on issues of conditionality, the things that always become the sticking points in the negotiation. What might we expect? Can you take us inside the negotiations a little this week and what we should look for going forward?
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying that in the 1990s, early 92, 93, after I finished my PhD, I actually worked at the fund as an economist there. So many of the things that they talk about, I actually truly believe this. When I was studying in America and when I did a PhD, I actually was a fairly free market, believer in free market. I still am. But Pakistan has made me a little bit of a leftist actually, because we have such a elite benefiting country that almost every subsidy that you can speak of actually go to the richest people. We have one subsidy program, the BISPA Asas program, that is about 2% of GDP. No, not even that actually. And that about other than that, every subsidy goes to the very rich. And us coming to the IMF also is symptomatic of the fact that we rig our system and subsidize the rich and do stuff that we end up with the deficits that we do, the huge budget deficits that actually translate into huge current account deficit, and that translates into losing foreign exchange, and then we have to run to the fund. So I've thought about this quite a bit, and the previous government put me in jail for about 5 months, so that gave me a lot of time to read some books, not yours. and it occurs to me that if we keep going to the fund every so often, and I think we've had like 20 some programs, that we've never become a rich, independent country. In a way, though, we're sort of a too big country to fail, and other friends bail us out. So we have this habit of going to the fund and getting bailout from friendly countries. But the thing is that we really have to give up that habit and doing so. And there's never a good time to start anything difficult, but I think we might as well just do it now. So we've actually had good discussions with the fund. They've talked about removing the subsidy on fuel. I agree with them. Yes, there should be some targeted subsidy to the very poor, because life has become very difficult, especially since the Ukraine war. And that just coming out of the COVID, we never had a respite. But nonetheless, we can't afford to do the subsidy that we're doing. So we're going to have to curtail this. The other IMF fund things that the IMF are asking, for some structural reforms, independence of the central bank. Those are not things that should be controversial. Those are normal things that we should be doing anyway. We run a huge loss in the power sector. I think right now the accumulated losses are about 2,400 billion rupees in the power sector. Another 1,500 billion rupees, I'm told, in the gas sector. That's not a good way to run a country, really. So these are basic management things that that we fail to do, and that's why we keep going back to the fund again and again. And until we get our focus right, we'll not be able to fix those things. And I think that is something that we are absolutely sure now that we need to do. We've tried everything else.
So I'll ask one more and then turn to Uzair. There's really a follow-up on that, because you referenced, of course, higher commodity prices, ripple effects from the war in Ukraine. So I wonder, one, how that makes what you're saying more challenging to implement, but then also just stepping back from a broader perspective, You have spoken about the need and Pakistan's need to integrate more in the global economy, reduction of import substitutions, global supply chains. How does everything happening now? We saw a very sort of gloomy outlook from the IMF on the global forecast, the downgrade. I think some would say that it was almost a conservative downgrade, a further downgrade could be coming. So how do those sort of external headwinds impact your reform and implementation plan?
And Mr. Minister, full disclosure, we hired Josh Lipsky away from the International Monetary Fund, so you should know.
And Dr. Bakir comes from the fund, so there's this.
That was a good hire, by the way. This Ukraine crisis has really, hurt not just Pakistan but a lot of countries, right? So did COVID. But I think the bank, State Bank of Pakistan, Central Bank, I think steered the country quite well during the COVID situation. And because our currency is in a free float against the US dollar, so that automatically provides some cushion or some brakes against things that go wrong. But it's a challenging situation. The one good thing is that Pakistan, for instance, this year is more than self-sufficient in sugar. In fact, we'll probably end up exporting a little bit. Hopefully, the reports are that we might actually have a good wheat crop also. If we have to import, we'll have to import very little. Some wheat actually goes from Pakistan to Afghanistan, so we have to cater for that as well. But we should be almost self-sufficient of wheat. So the only thing that really is hurting us internationally because of the Ukraine shock is the oil prices. And that's really hurting us. The governor tells me that but for oil, we actually are a surplus of current account, and of the increase of our imports, 2/3 is because of vaccines and oil and food. Some diet and some driving less cars, and then we should be okay. So we'll get over this difficulty. The larger problem is that 80% of manufacturing in Pakistan is for domestic sector. Okay. I met today with Procter & Gamble and Coke and Pepsi and all these people who invest in Pakistan, and we're very happy that they've invested in Pakistan. And I was telling them that, I really want you to export something out of Pakistan. You've come here and talked to me about giving you concessions of duties to import, which is fine. But show me some exports as well. 80% of what Pakistani manufacturers do is sell to Pakistan. And that's really surprising because Pakistan is a poor country with compared to the rest of the world, very small population. So why would you set up a factory in Pakistan and sell only to Pakistanis? Why would you not sell to the rest of the world? And the answer is that because of high barriers, we've made selling to Pakistanis very lucrative. So somehow you have to take down those barriers. Now the problem with taking down those barriers is that half of the money we make in taxation come from the very barriers that we set up. So it's not that easy an issue. But the Secretary of Finance here will figure some ways out in the next month, and but seriously, we need to move away from this import substitution model, which is basically rent seeking by the elite, and go towards an export model, explicit export promotion model, and away from this import substitution model, which basically means that you get to sell to Pakistanis with a lot of barriers, and that every time leads. What happens every time is that every time we have growth, it's very easy in Pakistan to get growth. We have a 2.5% population increase. To get 5% growth is not rocket science. We get that growth, but then we end up with a current account deficit. The issue is now to actually get the sort of growth that doesn't get you there, and that can only be done by robust increase in exports. Our exports are not that much. Imports are not that much. Our exports are not enough, and that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Who's there?
It's good to see you again. Thanks for taking out the time today. You did say in your opening remarks that this is an election year. You're heading to elections in the next few months. I was just curious to hear from you. What are 2 or 3 measures of success from your point of view that 6 months down the line, if I see you in Karachi at your offices, that you would say, what, we actually did a good job, and here are 3 things that I accomplished in my tenure. What are those 2 or 3 things?
No matter what we do, I'm still going to say we actually did a good job. But I think the one success for me immediately would be to get Pakistan back on track with the IMF. Seriously, that's important to me. I think that if we leave this government, whenever we do, a year from now most likely, that I want to leave Pakistan with maybe 50% more reserves than what I inherited, which is $10.8 billion. And most importantly, I want to have a measure of control on the current account deficit. We'll still have a current account deficit, maybe 2%, 3%, which is sustainable and which is what a poor growing country should have. But this 6% is beyond our means to afford. And whatever growth we have, I know this for a fact that my boss, Shahbaz Sharif, will want this to be an inclusive growth. There's just, it's no fun really in Pakistan to now have so many people, 70 million people now below the poverty line. That's not how you run a country. So if you can have inclusive growth and control the current account deficit, I think that would be a good job done for me.
Okay. My second question was related to a bit more, looking into the future. Obviously, financial inclusion, democratized finance remains a challenge in Pakistan. The technology sector is booming, but off of a low base. And I was just curious to hear from you what your thinking around these new economy areas are, particularly given our research here, both myself and Josh follow this sector closely, the emergence of Web3. Our analysis says that it's a $100 billion export opportunity for Pakistani talent in 20 years alone. And this is just talent, right? Josh and his team have been looking at central bank digital currencies and the potential there. So what is your thinking in terms of enabling some of these new economy opportunities for Pakistan, such that, yes, we deal with the crisis, but look 5-10 years down the future and say we're investing in the new economy for the country?
So let me just confess that I really don't know what Web3 is.
It's
so I mean,
yeah. There's something in your binder.
Yeah.
Okay.
After you read the earphones.
So that said, and that should tell you a little bit about where we would be in 5 years, right? No, but the Deputy Governor of State Bank, Murtaza, is sitting here, and I invite him to chime in whenever he thinks he needs to. I don't really know so much about this. I know that the fintech and new industry, new technology companies in Pakistan have attracted a lot of money last year, and you're right, from a very low base, and we want to have them flourish as much as we can. I don't really know much that we can do to help them. I know a lot we can do to harm them. So I think as long as the government stays away from them, that would help them. But seriously, there is a tendency in Pakistan that as soon as you see a business, incipient business coming up, we'll start taxing them. So I'll resist that urge to tax them, but I'll let them be and let them play their own game, and hopefully they'll rise and keep the government away from them. That's my short answer. But I really am not very educated on fintech and all that stuff. If you want to add something, please go ahead about the current digital currency and all that, especially.
I think one of the most exciting things that's happening in Pakistan right now is that you have IT exports really growing very fast. You have phenomenal growth in exports, and that's one sector I think going forward will be quite important in terms of turning Pakistan into a export-led economy. On the state bank side, we've taken a few measures to digitize it. We have the Russian digital account, which is a way to onboard our diaspora, allow them to open bank accounts in Pakistan, visit Pakistan, and do all kinds of investments in banking sector activities remotely. That initiative has gone very well. It's part of our financial inclusion initiative. It's also bringing capital into Pakistan. In the last year and a half, we've had $4 billion coming through these accounts. This is still just the tip of the iceberg. 1,000 accounts that we opened, but there's about 7 million Pakistanis outside Pakistan. A couple of other things that we're doing. We have RAST, the Instant Payment Gateway System. We also have, thank you very much. We also have recently put out a licensing framework for digital banks. We've got a lot of interest. We will be, giving 3 banks a license to do things digitally in Pakistan. We think the financial system actually can help change Pakistan's growth model in a big way. If you have efficient financial intermediation, you have, banks providing financial services in a more broad-based way, that can also be an engine of growth. In Pakistan's case, financial development is very low right now. On central bank digital currencies, we are certainly looking at it. We're going to be a bit careful, as we should be. but it's something that we are getting a lot of technical assistance on from other central banks as well. So I think watch that space. I think overall, I think your question is a very good one. The digital revolution allows Pakistan to leapfrog as well, and that's going to be very important. Thank you.
This is a conversation we'll continue in the private session, but it is my great honor to thank you for participating in this public part of the conversation. I want to thank our audience online for joining us. And as has been acknowledged, we are joined by a remarkable delegation from Pakistan. But I, in particular, just want to take this last minute to thank our colleagues at the embassy here in Washington, working with DCM Bukhari, working with Councillor Shahid. Is a credit to your embassy, Ambassador Khan. It really has been a tremendous pleasure to work with them to put this event together, as well as several events over the past year where we have hosted Dr. Bakir and previous ministers as well. So with that, this concludes the public portion of our event. Please join me in thanking the minister right now, please.